What's up everyone, Kaze no What If is here with what if a soul was transferred into Coby's body. Before we start, if you like the video, like it, share with your friends, comment, and let's start the video. Prophet in heaven. If we're going to heaven, I have preparations to make. Coby spoke seriously as he looked far above them. My foretelling told me that I'd meet a god traveling with Luffy, but I didn't think it'd be so soon. Robin watched with a raised eyebrow as the pink-haired pirate walked back into the galley and into the room reserved for the males. His expression was controlled, as it tended to be when he was deep in thought, and she quickly picked up on the subtle shift of Zoro's shoulders. It didn't happen all that often, but when the somewhat baby-faced, and somewhat insane boy fell deeply into his own thoughts, it was as if some instinct brought the swordsman to check if his weapons were free to slide out of their scabbards in the blink of an eye. She didn't know Coby, not truly, despite the clear camaraderie between him and the others, despite the obvious respect and interest he held for everyone's specific set of skills. It was as if there was a glass between him and the world, and only rarely that distance vanished. For example, while talking shop with Usopp, or while learning as much as he could of field medicine from Chopper. When his enthusiasm for what he was doing overwhelmed his natural, calculating manner. It was the same distance she had spotted appearing between the moment he pulled the trigger on one of Crocodile's legs, blowing it up, and the flippant deference with which he answered to Luffy's reprimand. "I'm glad you decided to come on board." The sun seemed to snuggle amidst the white clouds while the waves broke under the cheerfully sailing Going Merry. Despite the several, perfect patch UPS that Usopp had been able to realize thanks to clever applications of his fruit, it was clear to any expert navigator that the drag of the waves was keenly felt against the hull. And that even with the great care that bordered on the obsessive of the pink-haired pirate, it was a miracle that everything was still working as well as it did. Robin regarded Coby with a wan smile while she sat at a small table on the upper deck, the breeze whipping her hair as if a dark flag that, not unlike a Jolly Roger, screamed defiance. He placed a chessboard on the table between them, and quickly arrayed the pieces on it. They were of excellent make, onyx black and marble white, from the foot soldiers to the highest ranked piece, each was unique while keeping a sense of continuity. Marines and revolutionaries. The king of the white pieces was the unmistakable, stylized, form of a celestial dragon, with a bubble helmet of perfect white concealing the features of its unisex appearance, which was merely confirmed by the set of miniaturized golden shackles that dangled from its waist. A good, miniaturized imitation of Sengoku the Buddha stood as the queen, with Garp the hero as one bishop, complete with his Doberman helmet, and something resembling the fluffy feathered cloak of Doflamingo wrapped around the figurine. "It's been good training for Usopp." Coby spoke idly. "He has an artistic mind and a keen eye, his power truly fits him. I merely described the more important parts." It was counterintuitive how he'd use a vice admiral and a Shishibukai as a bishop, instead of two of the three admirals, but the role of the piece was clearly inscribed into the bases, which were enough to identify each piece. Still, the choice of Boa Hancock and Jinbe as knights surprised her even more, if not as much as seeing Akainu and Kizaru as the rooks. The pawns varied, and Robin didn't recognize their single identities at all. Noticing her interest, the pink-haired pirate spoke softly. "In chess, the freest piece is of course the kite, which moves rather uniquely, and with the ability to jump beyond her pieces." As he talked, he briefly toyed with the black pieces, drawing Robin's attention to them. The sight of the king made her smile a bit more genuinely, standing as the king was an imposing figurine of a fishman, which held emblazoned red on his chest the mark of the Sun Pirates. Curiously, she fingered the white, small statue of Jimmy I, recognizing that the mark was there too, even if it had been left white. "Fisher Tiger as the Revolutionaries' king?" She asked for clarification, which the pink-haired pirate didn't hesitate in delivering. With a tone that sounded like he was barely holding back a peal of laughter, Coby spoke, "Ideas, and dreams, can they truly die?" With long hair and a mark clearly visible on one side of the face, Dragon stood as the queen of the black pieces, followed by a humongous-headed figure of a man in spandex for one of the bishops, with a cloaked, mysterious figure as a counterpart. The unmistakable miniature of a man with a straw hat stood as a knight, mirrored by the humongous shape of Whitebeard himself on the other side. Kneeling, the form of Bartholomew Kuma made up for a rook, and had what looked like a murder of crows in flight as a counterpart. Each was sculpted with extreme care, and besides the first that emerged from the base of the piece, the wings of the others bled into the bodies of the birds, making up a small cloud of them. A Shisabukai as one of the revolutionaries' rooks? Is that the piece you want the story of? Coby's gaze became heavy and unyielding as he met hers. Those eyes could be as calculating as Robin's, and he could be just as callous. I warn you, you'll have to capture it for me to deliver it. Following his implied suggestion, she looked at the black pawns, who again were a succession of figures she didn't recognize. Still, they all shared a fierce grin, and all held a small book in one hand and a sword in the other, even her own, small copy, who stood, angled forward as if to pounce, right in front of the knight represented by Luffy himself. Her smile dimmed when she recognized her own features as one of the pawns, and she rose a challenging eyebrow. Do you see me as a pawn? Pirates do not make good pieces for this game. I'm afraid the grin of Coby was unnaturally bright, as if he didn't care one bit about how his implications could be received. But I do like that a pawn can become a queen. I thought that a historian such as yourself would appreciate the added layer to the game. We're actually going to play? She still eyed with concealed distaste her own small figure. She'd never make such an expression. That bloodthirsty smile was almost frenzied, and she didn't like the implications, not a single one of them. Well, White moves first. The pink-haired pirate stretched back on his chair, letting his challenge lie in the open. With a precise use of her power, Robin turned the chessboard, so that Coby would be the one playing with the whites, and raised an eyebrow of her own. A story for each captured piece? I wouldn't have it any other way. Her opponent hunched forward on his seat. Who knows, it might even be history instead of a mere story. She had been greatly unnerved by the match that followed. She eventually won against the casually dismissive way in which Coby had sacrificed his pieces, but she had the feeling that he simply couldn't bring himself to play to his best while bearing the miniature of a celestial dragon as a king. Without giving it away, and using every inch of skill learned in her years on the run to avoid giving away what she really felt or thought, she had been almost spooked because she couldn't tell from Coby's expressions or gestures if what he told when one of his pieces was captured was truth or lie. Only when her knowledge of the history involved matched what he told she could say for certain that he was telling the full truth about a certain character. However, only when she captured his Jinbe Knight, she felt comfortable with the idea that everything was as reported in the papers, back when she was 17, 9 years after Ohara's destruction. Other times, she had the feeling that Coby had been lying, as such telling a story rather than history under the terms of their added layer to the game of chess. His smile was a bit too wide when he told of how Hancock was a powerful pirate that had been offered the position of Knight of the Sea. It was as if he had been goading Robin into doubting what she remembered reading about her assignment in the news at the time. Yet what else could there be? Yes, Coby was a dangerous man. The baby fat was just finishing leaving behind his features, and while his body was shaping up into something that could belong to a powerful fighter, it didn't hold yet the brute certainty of Zoro, nor the precise strength of Sanji. Of course, the memory of seeing him offer himself as bait for a sea king not long before the Straw Hat Pirates made to Jaya was yet another thing that made her wary around him. Still, she didn't feel like she was under a scope from an enemy. No, he was merely a bit sadistic, something that he shared with the woman who had once held the title of Miss Valentine, which now seemed to naturally be dragged into the pink-haired pirate's orbit. Yes, he had a mind potentially as dangerous as her own, but the enthusiasm that peeked through during their match seemed genuine to her. That emotion, he couldn't fake. When she captured his pieces, he seemed drunk on life, and the heaviness in his gaze was swapped out for something far more bright and carefree. He was dangerous, but as blatant as it was, she felt challenged, instead of threatened. It was a peculiar feeling. With a practiced flex of her devil fruit powers, Robin observed in the men's room, manifesting an ear to be able to listen in. She saw how he was in a seiza position in the middle of the room, a disc tied to a string next to him, and a pristine package that she knew Sanji prepared that very morning. Robin, his voice didn't sound as loud as if he had been shouting, "Please, pop an eye in front of me, I'd like to watch you in the eyes while I explain." She did as he asked, and what she heard left her speechless. This time she was sure she was telling a story. It was the only possibility. Then why did all of her being seem to believe that he thought he was speaking the truth? God was intrigued. He had felt the dwellers of the Blue Seas enter his domain, and he had been pleased, as surely other players for his selection for the Arc Maxim, other potentially worthy servants who'd follow him to the Fairy Verth, could only make the game more entertaining. This seemed a colorful bunch, even. His mantra, empowered beyond all reason by his own unique might, grasped everything that happened on Skypiea, from the furthest edge of the White Sea, to the stars themselves. He was God, and that was only natural. One of the Blue Sea dwellers had, to the irritation and confusion of his companions, come prepared. He had been fasting to purify his body, and he carried a blindfold to not sully his mind. He chose to not touch weapons in order to not tar his soul, and while his companions had now joined others in the city, he remained on the deck of the subpar vessel they had all used to climb to heaven. He knelt on his own, in silence, in front of a low table that had been covered by a perfectly white cloth, among 3 small trees that held curiously orange fruits. And as he knelt during his meditation, he prayed. A barrel full of water was on one side of the altar, another was full of precious Verth, and God's interest was piqued. God above all, bless me with your presence, fill my ears with your voice, and eat with me, so that as I break my fast, my soul might mirror your radiance. The odd, pink-haired devout knelt in front of what God realized was a small altar, and he prayed. He set a package on it. With his unmatched mantra, Enel could hear the never-ending prayer. God above all, bless me with your presence, fill my ears with your voice, and eat with me, so that as I break my fast, my soul might mirror your radiance. And God, bored before the beginning of his game, decided to meet this holy man in person. He was weak, unaware of the overreaching senses of God, but as any truly faithful, he acted as if God could hear everything. He was different from those that had witnessed Enel's might, for he believed without proof, and without pretense. His inner voice was clear as his spirit as he prayed, God above all, bless me with your presence, fill my ears with your voice, and eat with me, so that as I break my fast, my soul might mirror your radiance. The only thing that filled the human spirit was that prayer, the only thing that his inner voice spoke of was the acceptance of a higher being, and pushed by boredom as much as a faint, preemptive taste of amusement at the potential enlightenment that Enel could provide. God reached the odd faithful who so prayed. God above all, bless me with your presence, fill my ears with your voice, and eat with me, so that as I break my fast, my soul might mirror your radiance. God above all, bless me with your presence, fill my ears with your voice, and eat with me, so that as I break my fast, my soul might mirror your radiance. God above all, bless me with your presence, fill my ears with your voice, and eat with me, so that as I break my fast, my soul might mirror your radiance. Enel appeared with the drum-shattering song of thunder, far above the meaningless, wooden vessels that depicted a goat of sorts as its figurehead, and the pink-haired boy who never stopped praying, his heartbeat steady despite the sudden rumble in the sky. Tilting his head to the side, God watched as the faithful never wavered, his spirit as calm as before, with hunger simmering as if a coat just around his shape, a feeling that he wouldn't give in to, without Enel's intervention. A part of the lightning Logia considered postponing everything, if only to see how close to death that strange fellow would come while waiting to meet God, another briefly considered killing him instantaneously, with no explanation nor reason. As he didn't need either, for he was God. Yet, God above all, bless me with your presence, fill my ears with your voice, and eat with me, so that as I break my fast, my soul might mirror your radiance. The voice of the praying man reached his ears directly then, and Enel, despite himself, found himself smiling patronizingly. The prayer rang, again and again, and curiosity won over God himself. With another movement too fast to be followed, Enel appeared in front of the praying man, and sat cross-legged in front of the makeshift altar, briefly taking notice of the pleasant smell given off by the trees surrounding them. While hardly rich, this could be a respectable attempt at worship. Never before a faithful asked for my voice before knowing of my existence. The calm into the pink-haired man's spirit was broken by a sudden spike of joy, followed by caution, and calm once more as his prayer stopped. God, is that truly you? A bolt of lightning passed just past the pink-haired man, who sat with his eyes bandaged, in order to keep himself from impure thoughts, and Enel grinned sardonically, despite knowing that he wouldn't be seen. You called, I came, and now you doubt? Never. The faithful gasped, a hint of shame appearing in his inner voice as Enel watched closely, but many would take advantage of someone seeking the enlightenment that only God can provide, and spare me. God became bored quickly as the groveling began, and the pink-haired man was quick to shut his mouth, his hands deftly undoing the package which had been sitting quietly in the middle of the altar. Gesturing with the head towards the barrel full of water, the man with a bandage covering his eyes spoke, as an offering, I brought water from the blue seas. Turning towards the other side, he continued, I brought land from our isles. And finally, turning towards the now unveiled food on the altar, colorful, varied food that smelled so deliciously despite being at the same temperature of the environment around them, and I brought the result of the union between the two, so that my soul might be brightened if God was willing to break his fast with mine. Useless water, and a handful of earth. Enel wasn't impressed, despite the dangerous way in which the barrel of water sounded to his mantra, but he was interested in the whole affair. What do you hope you'll gain if I agreed to eat with you? Surely my God knows how such an honor would make this faithful feel like having the sun in his heart for 1,000 years. The pink-haired, odd man chuckled, truly thinking that Enel had meant to make a joke. You seem strangely prepared to meet God, for a man so ill-prepared, and whose arrival in heaven was due more to luck than to skill. Enel enjoyed exposing the obvious holes in the story offered, only to freeze when the truth was spoken. Prophecy spoke of how God would one day call to all the faithful, and how he'd take his chosen to the endless sky, far above heaven itself, to the ever-moving moon. The spirit of the man was elated as he whispered the truth, and Enel understood how he could be so calm and happy despite the hunger and the potential breaking of his faith had God not answered his prayer. Long I have been derided for my faith, God above all. But the prophecy spoke of how only those that the Almighty ate with could be worthy of being uplifted. He had no fear, because God was with him. I put a trial in place, to select those worthy of joining me. Enel spoke with triumph in his heart, all of his dreams and plans being at once confirmed and reinforced by the prophecy the pink-haired man spoke of. If the only thing he had to do to confirm the prophecy spoken of referred to him was to eat along with this little, odd man, then he could. If you choose me, highest, I'll face the trial with your light in my soul again. There was no hesitation, only endless, almost desperate eagerness that was now sharply joined by a pang of hunger. Almost enthralled by the faith he was being exposed to, Enel took a spoonful of the rich plate in front of him. And how did Robin's proper introduction go? I opted for a full scene in her memories coupled with a bit of deep thinking, which I feel it's something she'd do. There are of course a shit ton of implications about each choice of each piece for each role of their small game of chess, and maybe I'll add other scenes later on to explain them. This is the last chapter in which nothing changes between the two versions of this FIC. From the next chapter, we'll be dealing with one story that is truly divergent and growingly original from canon, and one that instead follows canon but with extra steps to it. I'm already bored at the thought, but it will be interesting until after Marineford at the very least. As always, I won't swear that a story will be completed unless I break through the 50k words, and Unbound, Stealing the Thunder was the declared exception, so I have time still to drop everything. Let me know your thoughts. Chapter 7. First Mate. The crew was entertaining themselves in the home of angels when Robin approached Chopper with the kind of sneaky grace only someone with her past could be capable of. "Doctor, could you come with me? I'm told I'll need your medical expertise." "Of course, Robin." The human reindeer had been worried at first, but none of his senses reported anything amiss with the archaeologist's health, so he had followed with curiosity in his mind. Which eventually elaborated a possible answer to the odd request when it was clear that they were walking back towards the Going Merry. "Is this about Coby?" "He started behaving very oddly when it turned out we'd go into the sky, but while I can't really recommend fasting for any lengthened stretch of time, I cannot act against his explicit wishes. I cannot force him." "It is about Coby," Robin replied as the two finally climbed on board, "but... Arg. We need a doctor." Upon spotting the slumped form of a strange man with what looked like drums held in an iron circle jutting out from his back in front of an imperturbable, still meditating Coby, his instincts went haywire. "Wait. I am a doctor." In less than a second, Chopper began the needed procedures to check upon the fallen man, only to immediately realize that there was nothing to do. The man was dead, and Coby gave no sign that he was aware of anything that was happening around him. Robin's voice made Chopper act immediately. He mentioned that he'd need you to snap out of it. A rumble ball was crushed between the human reindeer teeth, and a familiar flat ring tied to a string was pulled out of the doctor's bag. In his brain point, Chopper processed everything that happened, and while the logic that ruled his thought process at the time balked at the idea, it was clear that Coby had planned for this precise set of events. That with the glass ball that he kept referring to as his crystal aid to scrutinize the ether, he had decided that putting himself under hypnosis would be the best course of action. Now, Chopper spoke with a serious, calm, and reassuring tone, temporarily pushing aside his curiosity in order to accomplish what was needed instead. "I'll count from 3 to 1, and when I say Django, you'll be freed from the hypnosis." The pink-haired pirate didn't move at all. It was like a machine that once accomplished its task, shut down, waiting for a set of orders that would never come. Maintaining his facade of cool professionalism, the doctor spoke. 3, 2, 1. "Django." With the click of his hood-like hand, Coby shuddered, and with a jerky set of movements, he removed the blindfold, turning his unfocused eyes towards the blurry shapes of Robin and an incensed doctor, who did not appreciate arriving too late to save a life. "I think we're owed an explanation, yes." The pink-haired pirate simply smiled, turning briefly towards the fallen Enel, before throwing back his head and letting out a loud bout of laughter, sheer relief and joy overwhelming him now that the self-hypnosis had been cast aside by Chopper's intervention. The pink-haired man rose to his feet and began a little dancing gig before another voice rang on the deck, bringing a grimace to his face. Sanji's expression was thunderous as he lit up a cigarette, "And it better be something good enough for me not to kick you off the sky, as I see you've used once more something as holy as food as a weapon." The pink-haired pirate resisted the urge to scoff in annoyance, and tilted his unfocused gaze towards the dark-haired beauty for a moment. Before returning it to the inquisitive and peremptory Sanji, "I'm sure Robin can enlighten you about the merits of killing the one who ate the Goro Goro no Mi before he decided to annihilate the entire sky, and us along with it." Whatever answer the three members of the Straw Hat Pirates might have been waiting for, it sure wasn't that, and the archaeologist's frightened gasp, which lent weight to Coby's claim, was the only thing that stopped the cook from going on a well-deserved rampage on the unrepentant pink-haired man. Because someone who could and would trick and lie in order to plan out an assassination on that caliber no longer deserved to be treated with the indulgence one would reserve to a kid. Sanji let out a pained grunt while he bit on his cigarette, his mind was fighting a war with his fiery spirit, only to come down to an impasse. Coby had, once again, used food to kill. It went against everything the cook believed in, it went against all he knew food was meant for, it was something that the pink-haired pirate understood. For there was no denying his joy in providing for the crew when working in the galley under the directions of the blonde slave driver. The what? Why did you kill him? Luffy wasn't happy, and it was clear in the heavy frown that seemed to summon a shadow between the brim of his hat and his eyes. He wasn't murderous, not even close, but he wasn't happy, and despite the angels of Skypiea celebrating to the best of their abilities, that we were all holding ourselves back from joining them was the meanest sign of how serious this thing was. I simply shrugged, unrepentant. He was evil, he planned to destroy the sky island we're currently standing on, and he could have killed any one of us. Zoro, ignorant, suicidal Zoro, was annoyed because he didn't have the chance to cut down God. Usopp had accepted the news with barely a blink, having grown to trust the plans that I formulated to steer away from my predictions, while Makita barely held back from cackling. And Nami didn't quite manage to hide her relief at the idea of no longer having to fight a lightning Logia. Chopper was holding back on having a serious conversation about the merits of self-hypnotizing myself to trick gods into committing suicide, while Robin held back Sanji from attacking me with a simple well done. Monkey D. Luffy crossed his arms, unimpressed, but if we don't fight, it doesn't count. If we fought, we would have lost. Oh, sure, I knew that my captain had been able to deal with Enel, but in the meantime I clearly remembered Robin getting charred, and the Going Merry was damaged even further. We won against Crocodile because he had a lousy power. As far as Logia Devil Fruit go, this one was pure lightning. Has Zoro learned to cut it like he learned to cut stone, or steel? Are you faster than the tip of a bolt of lightning? Even if ambushed, he could have run circles around us. The weapon I used on Crocodile would have done nothing to someone capable of moving faster than I can think. But, why did you kill him without a fight? Luffy's question, however, threw me for a loop. It was as if he hadn't listened to a single word of what I said, and I took a deep breath, holding myself back from snapping. Nobody spoke. This was a matter between myself and the captain. Robin had already explained why that particular fruit was unreasonably powerful. She had recalled how it was deemed invincible, but of course, those thoughts didn't resist long in Luffy's mind. So I tried another way. It's not that we haven't fought, it's more like we made a bet with our lives on the line. If he figured out what I was up to, he would have killed me. If he didn't, he would have died. The strongest opponent is meant for the captain to fight, everyone knows that. Luffy's gaze turned almost into a glare that I met without fear. You only told me to not butt in your fights, Captain. I reminded him of Alabasta, when I snuck in a debilitating low on Crocodile. I won't apologize for protecting the crew, even from your warped sense of what is proper. That seemed to pierce through his thick skull, and tension left his shoulders. You thought he would have hurt our Nakama? Yes. I held my chin high. He nodded decisively, as if erasing that matter from his mind, only for another to pop in to take its place. Why did you lie to us? It was my turn now to cross my arms and tilt my head in confusion. Lie. You told all that stuff about meeting God, and stopped eating, and became boring and silent, but you didn't tell anyone about what you knew and what you wanted to do. You told me to keep my predictions to myself, remember? I could recall easily that particular moment. It had been not long before we met Zoro. You forbade me from spoiling your adventure. But you could have warned the others. Even as he spoke, he didn't seem sure of his answer. It was as if, while perfectly happy to die while following his dream, he never considered the thought of one of his companions dying. Which is fair. I banked on his plot armor more than once, but he doesn't know about that. Besides Robin, and maybe Makita, Coby tilted his head towards the blue-eyed, blonde woman. Nobody in this crew can keep up an effective ruse, and I didn't know how far God could see or hear. even if while we talked, he told me he felt us arrive from the blue seas. You don't trust us? The accusation rang heavily across the deck, and I winced. It wasn't entirely incorrect. I trusted plot armor, that had been the only thing that pushed me to offer myself up as Sea King bait back when I needed a way to draw the giants to us. But in the canon story, besides Zoro and Luffy himself, everyone had survived or kept going despite debilitating injuries only thanks to the invisible hand of the author guiding their steps. That wasn't a reason to allow events unfold to have Usopp beaten within an inch of his own life by Frankie's family, or the Mary to be reduced to something so much lesser than what she was only to keep her around, as if she was a toy preserved out of wistfulness. Strong enough for it or not, Robin simply didn't deserve to be placed in a situation where she'd consider giving herself up for the only thing she'd ever come to consider a family. Ace didn't deserve to die for being Roger's son, and Luffy didn't deserve to see it happen in front of his eyes, just as he thought that he was saved. Some of the situations that had yet to be, like Usopp's, were already addressed. Our sniper held a veritable mountain of tricks under his sleeves now, and that was without even considering the fact that if push came to shove, he could simply bit off the limbs of his opponents. But I knew enough of how the octopus balloon worked to keep it going until Water 7, neatly avoiding Kuzan and the Foxy pirates while I was at it. The Mary was in better condition than she would have been without my intervention or my helping Usopp with repairs, but I had no way to stop Kuma's intervention on Sabaody. And I refused to let Ace throw himself between Akainu and Luffy only because the latter was so dumb to try and grab the first Svivra card when the battle was basically secured. I trust you to do your best once you're on the spot. I took a deep breath. I trust Zoro to keep pushing himself. I trust Usopp to keep panning and preparing for every eventuality. And I even trust that Makita doesn't want to feel powerless ever again. My gaze sharpened as it fell on the other members of the crew, but I know that giving it your all only when it's time to fight, is bound to have some of us die at some point along the way, and so I try to prevent that. Luffy stared at me oddly then, and he took a step back to sit on the bulwark of the Going Merry, his eyes never leaving mine as he grinned. So, if we train and become stronger, you'll stop lying? There was a pain tint to his voice, and I could tell that it was because it physically hurt when he got around to thinking. I felt myself grinning as a new understanding blossomed between me and my captain. In hindsight, this was a chat we should have had a long time ago, maybe as far back as when we reached Drum. To the simple-minded, the world was a simple place, and what had been nagging at Luffy was apparently an inability to guess my reasons. Zoro stopped standing next to the mast and walked to one side of the deck, slumping against the bulwark and closing his eyes, the hint of a smile tilting his lips while he closed his eyes and began breathing more slowly. If we all do our best, all the time, then I can only look forward to those we'll crush on the way to the One Piece. Shish ishi. Luffy laughed while tilting back his head, holding his straw hat as his smile widened so much it closed his eyes. Then it's fine, I trust you. Once more, it felt like he was the center of the room despite us being under the open sky, standing around on the Mary's deck, but this time, instead of being a mere spectator to it, I felt like I stood fully in that ethereal warmth. It was then, that whatever remote thoughts and plans I had harbored in the depths of my mind about Furter guiding ahead the member of the crew like puppets, despite it being for their own good, vanished like mist under the sun. Maybe for the first time since I had tricked my way into sailing with Luffy, I felt truly part of the crew, and truly, for the first time, I felt like I could begin to deserve the title of first mate. And okay, I've decided to at least get started with both the two different narratives I have in mind for this FIC. Hence this story was retitled Coby, the King's Shadow, while the other will be Coby, Thunder King. This follows closely canon, while the other, of course, will not. Still, while keeping up with the current style that alternates episode-like chapters like this one and jumps ahead with meaningful flashbacks to clarify the new elements, I hope that I'll manage to keep this FIC interesting. You'll see what I mean with the next 3 or 4 chapters. I want to get to Impel Down before I hit 50k words, so it will be a fast ride. With this chapter, I fully shackle the MC to Luffy's fate. I hope everyone enjoyed the characterization that I enforced here. Still, besides the preference between a more canon-oriented FIC and a more original one, let me know what you think. Chapter 8. A Way Forward. Usopp's gaze was hollow as he stared forward, unseeing. The whole galley seemed thick with silence, as if the IR itself had decided to choke the usual merriment that could be found there. It was the silence of the disbelieving, the silence of the furious, the silence of those that floundered to come to terms with the impending death of a loved one. It was the quiet of empty graveyards, and of loneliness. Each member of the crew had retreated behind their own walls of grief for a person that hadn't yet passed, but that they could do nothing to save. They had enough gold meticulously stored away thanks to Usopp's power that they could sink the local economy, and it didn't matter at all. The going merry was dying. For once, Luffy hadn't hesitated in asking Coby to do everything he could to save her, and this was the situation it brought forth. Everyone was in the galley, with silence as a cloak to hide their true thoughts while the blue-haired cyborg finished his report. "Keep the ship hidden, and don't exchange the gold just yet," the pink-haired pirate